time again that really isn't the right way to do it. You should have an independent investigative force or team investigating something like this. I mean, like you said, it's been 10 days. We haven't heard from the police. Obviously, as Harry said, they do have the same rights that everyone else has, but they've obviously lawyered up. They haven't spoken. So how now do you expect the Baltimore City Police Commissioner to investigate his own? You've got to have someone else come in with a fresh pair of eyes, a disinterested pair of eyes, and look at this case.
Harry, traditionally there is great resistance among police forces around the country to that sort of independent civilian review.
So here is precisely what I think should happen. I already told you guys we need the cameras. We need body cameras with audio. We need it monitored by a third party that is not able to be bought off by lawyers, crooks, or cops. And now we know, and I think we can be sure, that we need some kind of oversight, some kind of third party, disinterested oversight of police forces and police brutality cases, because the shit's got to stop, or we're going to be in a civil war within 10 years. The bad kind, like that kind we had before. Remember, you didn't know brothers fighting against brothers, people do be getting shot in their kitchen. Yeah, that's coming, because what people want is fair treatment. And I don't think that's something crazy to expect in a country like America that calls itself just, fair, and equal. Get the fuck out of here. We're about as just, fair, and equal as Iran right now. Bullshit. If you're white and wealthy, you're good. The rest, fuck the fuck off.
Right.
That's what you get.
Yeah. And typically, I mean, I don't even know why. I've got no problem with the Attorney General coming in and take a look at it. I mean, they did a good job in the Eric Holder case. They did a good job in the other case in Ferguson. I got no problem with Eric Holder's U.S. attorneys coming in and investigating this case. And I don't think the police department should have any problem with that either.
How much can the family at this point learn from an autopsy, Professor?
Well, you know, we haven't seen x-rays. We haven't seen the autopsy report. Hopefully the autopsy has been done by a board-certified forensic examiner rather than a hospital pathologist, because those autopsies are quite different. But,
really?
Oh, absolutely. You know, board-certified forensic examiners are trained, first of all, to be cynical and to examine the exact damage to the vertebrae and see what possible mechanisms might explain the break.
And that's critical, to find out what mechanism would have caused the damage to the vertebrae, whether it was an instrument like a baton or something, whether it was in a fall or what.
I would totally agree with that, yes. So there's a lot we can learn from the autopsy, but I think what we also need is to establish a better timeline and also keep an open mind, because, you know, strange things can happen. The police could have, for example, tackled Mr. Gray, and he could have dropped in such a way where there was a great deal of force, his body weight plus the pressure of the tackle that brought him down, creating tremendous forces on the cervical vertebrae. So how the vertebrae were broken is a critical piece of this. It could have not been a baton. It could have been a baton.
Why don't you shut your ass up?
But certainly we're not going to know the answer to this until we have a real clear timeline of what happened. And again, I say that the cord could have been partially severed. It could have happened in 2 stages. Things could very well have happened in a van. The van could have jolted, for example,
a lot of coulds.
and that would have triggered the break of the spinal cord.
Yeah, a lot of coulds, not a lot of answers at this point. Professor, good to have you on. Sonny Hostin, Harry Houck as well.
A lot of coulds, not a lot of answers at this point. As the gay Anderson Cooper has made clear, I think that one of the things that might have happened is they fucked him up a bit on the tackle and the takedown, whatever. Then they put him in the van and didn't strap him in and had a purposefully rough ride, if you will. What a thing, huh? Well, we don't like the way this guy behaved. Let's fuck him up. Yeah, it's just not... We got to expect more from our police officers. They give them the badge and the gun. They got to adhere to a higher standard of behavior than the criminals we're expecting them to arrest, not engage in the same fucking shit. How about Shep Smith? What do you guys think about Shepard Smith on Fox News? Do you realize that he is not afraid occasionally to be the voice of dissent? See, I have a personal hatred of Fox News because I watch the way they drive beliefs for their watchers and listeners. But I have a connection to Shepard Smith. I feel like, I don't know if we were torn from the same cloth. I mean, we definitely have some differences of opinion. But listen to what happens here when Shepard Smith has had enough of Fox News reporting on the Baltimore violence. Let's see how this goes. This gets a little testy here.
Smith
I kind of like
on
this
Fox
actually.
News, who is often the only voice of reason there, getting.
And let me just interrupt. This is a third-party program showing a clip from Fox News, so you're going to hear input from these guys
about the Fox News coverage of the violence and of the specific instances that are absolutely atrocious that have been taking place in the aftermath of Freddie Gray. This is a clip from Fox News. I think it speaks for itself.
About the governor, but we also, at least I haven't heard anything from any civil rights leaders. Have you?
I heard Alveda King on a little while ago on our air telling her to get people home, that this is not a way to solve any problems. But it seems like in the middle of all of this, to start picking on people for civil rights and what they're saying and what they're not saying, we could spend our time watching this and reporting on it as we have street after street. I don't know. I think
it might be a nice idea, nice timing for one of the higher profile civil rights leaders who tend to come in after the fact and say, look how bad things were with the police officers. But if they came in now during the thing saying, hey, let's call for peace, let's have some calm here.
That's a wonderful idea. I'm confident they're all watching and will, on your instruction, do exactly that. What we really need now is for it not to get dark before police get control. And if what they have is 42 state police and then 40 more to add to the city of Baltimore's police department, that's not what's going to happen. So there's been no word on the National Guard. There's been no word on how they plan to retake these streets. But we've watched the numbers
about
here,
to get a little dicky here.
And if police officers were to send people into this crowd, people would get hurt. So what is your alternative at this moment? I'm confident the police are trying to figure this out. But nobody involved, not the parents of these people, not the police officers and their families, nobody wants this to get to nightfall. Baltimore can't take that.
You mentioned parents. Where are the parents?
Well, you know, I've not been on the phone with them. But if we want to sit here and indict the civil rights community and indict the parents for what we're watching right now, instead of, for now, just covering what happens and then later talk about whose fault it is, because we don't know whose fault it is.
Can I just jump in, Chuck? No one's indicting anyone. We're watching the pictures. We're asking legitimate questions. A lot of our viewers are probably asking the same questions.
Bowling. The question was, where are the parents? Surely you don't expect me to know that.
No, my...
Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
My question was,
I agree, Chef. It was a hypothetical.
Civil rights leaders. Where's Al Sharpton? Where's Jesse Jackson?
You know what? I also don't know where they are. We've got a major American city that has decades of turmoil within this neighborhood. Decades. You heard the stories from Doug McKelway a little while ago of people being arrested for nothing, of a violent crackdown for years and years, of them feeling powerless and hopeless, and nobody listening to what they were saying. 1/4 of the youth locked up. Clearly there is a big problem. Then all of a sudden, an African-American man is taken into a vehicle and he comes out of it and dies. And you get nothing from authorities except a suspension. And then those who would do harm take an opportunity to do harm, and here we are.
Sometimes it's actually difficult to fathom why Shepard Smith doesn't walk out the door and at Fox News, because clearly his cool head when it comes to this is not the prevailing wisdom there. He's often the sole voice of reason and decency there. And people saying, hey, David, who cares what Fox does? Only a tiny percentage of the whole country's population watch Fox News. That's true, but Fox News has been successful at setting the agenda in terms of the angle of reporting on these types of stories. Think back to the Zimmerman case and Fox News' role there.
I love how he points out that these are questions that they shouldn't be asking and that they should just cover what's happening. I don't understand, like you said, I don't understand how he keeps this up, how he works for this organization, dealing with this, all day, every day at work.
The most important thing to be asking around this entire story is, how did a so-called medical emergency in an arrest that police claim had no force involved at all end up with a man dying after showing up at a trauma center with his head 80% severed from his body? That's the question I have.
That's a valid question. And we might not get to the bottom of that because, like I said, there's very little accountability the police department seems to be more interested in protecting themselves than protecting their citizens.
And the other thing is, why is it that there is this expectation that black leaders, just random black leaders from around the country, have to be out there speaking specifically, not to the 99.9% of nonviolent protesters, who also, many of whom are black, only to the people, the small minority that are acting violently? All of a sudden, the black leaders, if they don't, they're somehow complicit, Lewis.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't really think I even want to hear from them. How about we hear from some people who live in Baltimore instead, who have some insight into this matter? I don't like hearing from these spokespeople, appointed spokespeople.
Last thing, I think I may have said his head 80% severed from his neck. What I in the interest of precision, his spine reportedly 80% severed at his neck, and I want to just make sure I'm using all the right terminology. Send me your thoughts on this. We're going to continue talking about it.
Yeah,
back after the break.
That's good that you decided to get precise, because I'm pretty sure they didn't try to cut off his head, which would only put us 6 degrees away from Kevin Bacon, but right next to fucking ISIS. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. Why do we have to call Al Sharpton out, or Jesse Jackson, or whoever, to say, hey, guess what? Your black animals are acting up again. Better come reel them in. See, I heard someone recently, and there's this thing going around Facebook where there's this mom beating her kid for being involved in these protests. Have you seen the video? She comes out with a shoe and she's beating him upside the head. All right, I'll go ahead and make the jump in logic and assume that wasn't some sort of domestic issue. Maybe it was a mother beating her kid for acting up. Fine. What about the mother that didn't show up to beat the fucking cop upside the head that shot the guy 8 times in the back when he was running? Do we wish there was a mother there to smack him with a shoe? No, we don't. We don't, because we're not thinking justly. We're thinking that black guy must have been some kind of evil criminal, and he deserved to have his neck broken, if we're a typical white person. I don't blame blacks for being enraged right now. I really don't. I think they've had enough, and I don't blame them. And there's no punchline there. I honestly just don't fucking blame them for snapping. There's got to be a limit, and I think we've reached and exceeded it. And we've shown no signs of slowing down on this severe and extreme racism coming from law enforcement to those that are poor and men of color. This is the article I was talking to, or the RT, Russia Today, or whatever it is. They're a weird group. I mean, I know they're a mouthpiece essentially for Putin, but then they kind of branched off into this America thing. So I think it's a sort of a surreptitious attempt to come in and try to get some of the more naive American public over to thinking like the Russian leadership. I don't know. I mean, that's just a suspicion, because when you have a state-run type of organization that's media, how can you trust them? You know, I don't know. It'd be like taking the White House press secretary seriously. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? He's there to defend and promote one thing and one thing only, and that's the administration. So this is called There Are Real Law Enforcement Problems with Freddie Gray, and this is a U.S. Marshal talking on Russia Today.
Joining me from our D.C. studio is Matthew Fogg. He's a retired U.S. Marshal. Matthew, glad that you're here with me. I want to talk to you about these officers, because certainly when we talk about these 6, they are all entitled to due process. They are all entitled to have the full weight of the law, review their case, review what happened here. We don't want to jump to snap judgments, but I want to get your insight. You have 6 officers involved here. You have a case where Freddie Gray looks at the officers and then flees, and they pursue him. Is it a crime to run from a police officer?
Absolutely not. Just to run, no, that's not a crime. I mean, the issue here is, what was the probable cause for them to even stop him or to go after him? So that's the first point is, no, that's not a crime to run from the police. Some people have tried to say, well, it's a drug infested area or whatever. That gives them probable cause. No, that doesn't give them probable cause. So that's a problem right there.
Well, and when you talk about that, because that's a really broad brush, isn't it, to say, well, because I saw you in an area that's crime-infested or drug-infested, I can stop anyone at any time. But isn't that essentially what stop and frisk is?
That's exactly right. But once again, what was the probable cause for them to track and run him down, and then what happened after that? The key here is, when I look at everything and when I look at what happened, is once the guy was injured, whatever it was, They should have called for emergency equipment to come in and look at this man. That's the first thing we're trained is whenever you think you've got a person that's injured, call for the emergency units to come on the scene and to be able to look this person over, because that covers us in liability.